Welcome to the Tabletop Gaming Guild show. We are all about the experiences and memories that playing board games with friends and family can create. On tonight's show, we're going to be discussing hidden gem games. But before we uncover the gems, let's talk about what we've been playing lately.
Well, James would normally fill a huge chunk of this. However, he's not with us today. He's busy with work-related things. And I've only been playing one game lately.
Just one?
Yes, but it's not a normal game. I've been playing a really, really massive game called Oathsworn. This is like a Kickstarter that's basically the kitchen sink. It's got everything. It's got too much maybe, but I've spent several days just recording unboxings for this game. But it's basically a campaign game with pre-recorded narration. So you pull up an app, it'll walk you through, and it's broken into two parts. So the first part is the story, where you're basically doing RPG. You're going through the town, searching around the town, trying to find, evidence of what's going on, talking to people and interacting, to leading to the big encounter at the end of the scenario. And all those big encounters are hidden within a separate box, and every time you get into an encounter, you're supposed to go into your big box and pull out a little box, open it up, and reveal what the big monster is.
That sounds pretty cool. How are you liking it? Oh wow! Okay.
Oh,
right. I think all I've seen for this game is the cover art, and the cover art looks awesome. If it's the same game I'm thinking about.
Yes, it's probably. It's got a big rat on the cover, but it is a really cool game. It's cool, a lot of cool concepts. It is essentially the closest game I've ever played to D&D as far as board games.
Okay.
It's not quite Gloomhaven as far as the mechanics aren't as refined as Gloomhaven is, but compared to Descent, the early Descent games, it's definitely about that level.
I was going to ask you to compare this to Descent and Gloomhaven, since I know you love Gloomhaven.
Gloomhaven is one of those games. The mechanics are just so strong that even if you don't know a rule, you can kind of figure it out by what makes sense here. This is not quite there, but it's still a really well-made game. And, the monsters are really cool and fun to fight.
Like big miniatures or anything for the game?
Well, I could show you one without being a spoiler.
Oh, okay.
So let's just see if I can get this nicely in camera.
Ooh.
It's like almost the size of like half the size of my head.
Yeah. I'll take one.
That pre-painted. Most of them are not pre-painted.
Oh, and it's pre-painted?
So this is with the Kickstarter only.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure it's actually part of the game. It's just like a Kickstarter bonus. I have not seen any ways incorporated into the game yet, but
okay. Well, it's an awesome looking miniature. So
I don't know. Maybe it's just a first player token.
Maybe.
It's like that giant purple or green dinosaur, right? From
Firefly. So, Peter, what have you been playing lately?
So everybody probably knows I don't get to play a ton of games, so I don't usually have a lot to talk about, but I did have one new game that I have played, or new game for me. And that was Targi, which I really enjoyed. It's a 2-player, I'm not even sure how I would describe it. It's a 2-player worker placement, not area management, but yeah. So it's a very odd game, but for 2 players, which I get to play 2-player games way more often than bigger player count games. And me and my buddy played it, really actually enjoyed it a lot. It had some pretty interesting, kind of newer to me mechanics. The game board that you put your meeples on. Is just like the outer rim of the board, and then the inside of the board are tiles that you place, and then you flip them over and you see what they are, and you are going to place you take turns placing meeples. And so the first player will put one on one side of the board, and when they do that, then that starts to restrict the placement of the opponent's meeple. They can't put it opposite of you on the other side of the board. And so because everything in the middle is all about resources, and you're trying to gain these resources. And so you're cutting off resources from the other player. And there's also a robber meeple that is also working towards cutting off some of these lines of tiles. And so once everybody has laid their three meeples around the outer edge of the board, then you will place your tribe tokens where where all of your meeples intersect in the middle of the board. And so you'll put those. That's going to then, after everybody has placed their meeples and their tribe tokens, then you're going to take the actions that are represented by the spaces you've placed all of your tokens. So if you've placed all 3 meeples and your 2 tribe tokens, you'll take 5 actions, usually gaining resources, whether that's gold or some kind of like spice. I think they've got salt and pepper and stuff like that. And then you're going to gain those resources and utilize those resources towards your points at the end of the game. I found it really interesting. I liked the mechanic a lot of trying to strategically place your token, your meeple, and then your tribe tokens to stop the other player. You will get specific tiles that when you activate them, they're going to give you powers towards the rest of the game. And some of those powers are they can be kind of a little weak, and then you'll have other ones. There was one that once you had it, it was an immediate power, and the very next round, your opponent can only place 2 meeples instead of 3. So you're really limiting their ability to stop you from getting the items that you wanted. And then there were other upgrades that you could add to your board that were ongoing effects. And so those were pretty fun too. So it is definitely one that I would highly recommend for anybody who enjoys 2-player games, who enjoys worker placement style games with a decent level of strategic thinking. So I felt like there was a lot going on for it for a 2-player game. I was originally introduced to it by another YouTube channel that talks about games a lot, and that is Our Family Plays Games. I enjoy their videos, and so they were talking about 2-player games that they really enjoy playing, and that was one of the ones they had mentioned, and so I got to play it, and I really enjoyed it.
I'm sorry, but there's other YouTube channels other than us?
I've heard said that there are at least a couple out there. But yeah, so that's definitely one of the ones that I enjoy watching their content. They're good. I'm going to throw it to Dan.
All right. I'm gonna talk about 2 games that I got to the table relatively recently. The first is a game called Paleo. Paleo is a new acquire for me. This is a co-op game where you take on the role of a prehistoric human trying to survive and complete various objectives. The scenario that we played had us hunting animals and then like trying to track down shelter, I think. But like the game's got a decent amount of variability in the box, or so it would appear. There's 10 like decks of cards, and in order to play a scenario, you basically pick 2 decks of cards and mash them together. And there's like 6 or 7 recommended scenarios for you to go through, like in order from easy to hard, so that you like learn the system. We only played the first scenario, of course. We lost, of course, because it's a co-op game, but we felt like it was doable at least. What do you call it? A lot of the time, like we needed, food to feed our tribesmen. We needed wood and rocks to construct shelter. And these were all resources that you had to gather on cards. That was like one of the more interesting mechanics in the game. Is like there's basically this big deck of cards. You divide it evenly among all the players that are participating, and then each player like peeks at the back of 3 cards off the top of whatever their pile is. The cards have different backs. There might be a forest, a mountain, and a river, just an example, or a red backed card. The red backed card is usually something bad, but like it's not like they won't give you resources if you can't navigate the sometimes difficult challenge that they'll throw at you. And then like the other cards, if you need stone, you've got to go to the mountains, sort of deal. Like if you need wood, you've got to go to the forest. And you just pick one of your 3 cards to reveal. Everyone reveals simultaneously. And then you actually have an opportunity to either perform the action on your revealed card or use it to help somebody else if, say, you can't perform the action that you just revealed, or there's something really important the group needs to do that round. But like you go through the whole deck before the round resets. So you have a lot of opportunity to like gather resources and do things before the decks run out.
I like a co-op game, and it felt good just 2-player.
Yeah. I don't think that what do you call it? I think the game scales well enough with player count, because that's sometimes with a concern with co-op games, that there's usually a player count that's off either at the bottom or at the top of the spectrum. What do you call it? You need, at the end of every round, you sort of need to feed all of your active tribes member, and each player has starts with 2 active tribes member. So of course, with more players, you're going to have to collect more food every single round in order to do that. I did notice in our first play, the vast majority of the food cards represent animals that you hunt. And of course, once you hunt these animals, they go into a special pile where they're removed from the game for the rest of that game. So like potentially there's like a informal clock built into the game where the group is going to run out of food sooner or later, and then it's going to be game over.
Looks like it's got pretty nice production values too. Art's nice.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just a board, cards, and some wooden tokens, but I thought this was pretty well done for just that.
Nice. Sounds good.
The other game we got to the table was Maracaibo, the Alexander Fisher piece of excellence that is Maracaibo. Me and my brother have been playing this for a while. We're on our 11th or 12th play, where we played it once or twice to get the rules down, and then we started playing the narrative mode. There's like a story mode where you have to complete quests in order to advance the storyline. We're somewhere in chapter 10. I have no clue how many total chapters it is. I suspect we're nearing the end, but I don't know.
I've played the campaign. I think you're nearing the end, but I can't remember for sure.
Yeah, needless to say, we played Maracaibo. It remains awesome. We will continue to play Maracaibo, and I'm actually kind of looking forward to exploring some of the modules that exist only in the expansion that I purchased after we finished the campaign, because like we introduced the unique player powers in the middle of the campaign, but I want to sort of save the other 3 modules in the expansion content for when we're not in the middle of the story, more or less.
I'm super curious on when you finish the campaign for Maracaibo, because you've been playing it a long time in the campaign. So I want to see, once you finish it, what's your opinion about replaying it again?
Like I said, I'm already interested in checking out the game, bits and pieces of the game after we finish the storyline. And there's, yeah, I think there's a second storyline in the expansion. So if we get tired of like just generic Maracaibo, we can always start that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this has got another dozen plays minimum left in it before I would even consider, and maybe even not then, because like I said, it's like my favorite Fisher game. So,
and even then, it's like a branching path narratives where there's no real wrong answers per se. It just adds different elements to the game, so there's a slightly different mechanics as you go through the game. So I would say this is a game you could replay the story pretty easily.
I could see replaying the first scenario again, even though it would take another like dozen plays, because there are some choices that you can make to change the storyline. I don't think too many of them are that like super relevant. You could also do stupid things like the game puts a quest marker on the table, and it's like, hey, if you do this, A will happen. If you don't do this, B will happen. And you're like, well, maybe we won't do it just to see what B looks like, because we've been trying to actually do the thing that the game has been telling us to do. So
I did get a little bit of the feeling of the choose your own adventure style, where it's like you're eventually going to get to the same place regardless of what you do.
What do you call it? There's a little bit of branching here, but I don't think it's there very deep. I think you're on a tangent for maybe 2 to 3 quest cards, which is less than a game, and then you're back to where you would have been anyways.
And that just leaves us with Evan.
So Evan here pulled a Peter and did not get to play very many games over the last 2 weeks or so.
Boo.
Mainly because one, I went on vacation, so I was gone for a good portion of the game playing time.
Not a good enough excuse.
I know. I should have said I was playing Monopoly, and then I would have got the pass.
But isn't vacations the purpose of them is so you can?
I was pretty sure
games?
vacation was 4 games, right?
Those are my other vacations. These are the ones I had to take with my family. So I went to see my sister, so I didn't get a chance to play anything while we were down there. We were busy visiting and doing all sorts of fun stuff. And then the week before that was Library Game Day, so I did not get to play a lot of games. I ran a miniature game, got to play in a different one, and I played Crokinole for a little bit, but that was about it really that I got a chance to do. So I didn't get to do too much, but
I got to introduce 3 people to Blood Rage,
which is awesome.
It was, and then I beat them all.
Are you substituting for James here, trying to bring Eric and Lang in here as quickly as possible?
I didn't say his name. I didn't say his name. You did.
I just enjoy the fact that Pete scrubbed the scrubs at Blood Rage. Oh, here's this brand new game that you've never seen before. Excuse me while I wipe the floor with you.
And I did the same thing I always do, which is I answered every single question they had, and I gave them tips and ideas. I think from the very beginning of the game, I was like, and this is this is what I'm going to do, because this is what I do when I play the game. I told them right out the gate what my strategy was. And one guy did get really close though. It wasn't a total blowout. One guy was only 10 points behind me at the end of it. So it was pretty close, but it was a good game. Sorry, I jumped in on Evan. I just stepped on Evans.
Oh yeah, I was pretty much done, but yeah, Peter did really well. Just keeping the sword sharp for next time he plays James.
Exactly. I got to be able to beat him by 1 point again.
Now at the miniature table, though, we did coin the term of when you roll 3 or 4 ones in a row, that's effectively rolling a Peter. So we did label that at Library Game Day. So, well,
if you watched our Outer Rim playthrough, it's not just Peter.
No, it's not. It's not. But I'm fine with my name being on it. But it was definitely not me, just me. All of us were rolling crap.
So, Evan, anything else you played this? Or that was it?
That was pretty much it. I mean, I'm just working. SibCon's coming up, so I'm just working on stuff for that. So I don't know if I'm going to get too many more games in here before that. Right now I've been building MDF terrain, so I'm going to be busy with that for a little bit. But
speaking of SipCon's going to be awesome. Looking forward to it.
Going to have the best miniature tables there. Yay!
That's right.
So now I guess it's time to get out our spades and shovels and dig up some hidden gems.
Right. So
should we first talk about how we made our lists? Because this was something we actually talked about a little bit, and there was a fair amount of different ways you could actually approach this.
I think that's the fairest way, is if we all talked about what our criteria would be.
So yeah, I want to talk about what is a hidden gem, because I thought I had an idea of what is a hidden gem, and then I had a conversation with James, who's unfortunately not here tonight, and I changed my opinion.
Yeah, tell us what did you think it was, and what do you think it is now?
Well, I'll go with what I think it is now, because hindsight is 2020. So I think first and foremost that what is a hidden gem is largely subjective. Like a hidden gem for me might not be a hidden gem for Nathan over there, or you, Pete, right? Because I might not have heard of a game, discover it, and be like, oh, this is really good. And that's a hidden gem for me because I found it, by chance, didn't go out of my way to track it down, and discovered something I enjoyed. And then of course I go on to BGG and find out it's ranked in the top 200, so like, I think a hidden gem can be just about any game, as long as there's something about it that sort of, I guess, impedes access would be the best way to put it. So I'm gonna pick a pretty famous game as an example here. See if you guys agree with this or not. So in a way, you could call like Concordia a hidden gem game, because A, it is excellent and fun, but B, it's got a couple things that would make people kind of look over it the first or second or maybe even third time, because like the cover art is notoriously terrible. The components aren't particularly spectacular because it's just like a map of the Mediterranean Sea and some wooden bits and a set of cards and some cardboard coins, and that's it, right? You don't know what a kind of amazing gameplay that game has until you actually get it to the table, almost.
Hey, Concordia, I would think of it more of as a late bloomer, because when it first came out, it wasn't that well known, but it's gotten a few reprints. It's been talked about more and more, and I think at this point it's relatively well known.
But even with what Dan was saying, I think I would agree in that that is a board game that if I looked at it on the shelf and didn't know anything else about it, and then I flipped it over and I read what the game was, I would have just put it back on the shelf. I would have read about it. I would have looked at the price tag on it, because it's not a super cheap game. And I would have said, you know what? I don't think so. But I've played this game because of you guys, and now I love it. And so I would agree with Dan on why he's thinking this is a hidden gem. This is that diamond in the rough that you really got to polish it up. You got to actually play it to understand why it's so good. Because I think if you just read about what the mechanics are and you just look at the cover art, you're probably going to think, well, there's other games out there that maybe do some of this stuff, and maybe it looks a little bit more appealing. But Concordia does a fantastic job at all of its mechanics. Everything just blends together so well, and it becomes a really, really interesting and fun game. So yeah, I think I can totally see what Dan is saying, and I would back him on that.
So it's almost like you're defining hidden gems as like games that are easily overlooked, which is a fairly reasonable definition of that.
So my discussion with James brought up another point of contention, because at the beginning of the conversation, I was like, well, does that really make a game a hidden gem? And by the end of the conversation, I was like, oh yeah, I guess it kind of does. James pointed out to me that like poor marketing and distribution can make a game a hidden gem. Because the game might be really good. It might even look pretty good, but like if it's got poor marketing and nobody knows about it, well, then it sort of failed on one of more marks, right? Or, maybe the marketing was good, but like the production run was super short, or, it's only available for a limited time because they only made like a few thousand copies on Kickstarter, and it's going to take them 2 years to get back to the game to add more content to it.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the points I was going to bring up with some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about is sometimes you have the struggle of smaller studios trying to break in with their games against the larger market games. So, I mean, even though, Hasbro, doesn't have necessarily the best games, they're in a lot of the big box stores and they're going to overpower because they have the money to throw around versus stuff like self-published titles such as, Shiver Me Timbers, which I'm sure somebody's going to talk about. Kickstarter has made it better for some of those studios because now they have means to up their production value by going directly to the consumer to raise the money for it. But it's still a large hurdle to overcome for these smaller studios because they don't have the budget that Hasbro's or Avalon Hills do to go and put out their games. I mean, those companies can go and spend 10 million on TV ads and everybody's going to know, don't step on the poop, versus some of these amazing games that we're getting to review and play that are from these smaller titles or smaller companies.
And all that plays into a lot of how I built mine, indirectly from mine, but I was a lot more literal in mine. And I simply looked at my ratings, and I went on BGG and looked at how many people have rated or commented on this game. And basically, I said, okay, I'm only going to look at games that less than 10,000 people have actually rated. And then I'm going to compare that to what I rated the game and kind of rank them based on the difference between the two.
I love how analytical he gets. I love it. He's like, I need the data, and I'm going to use the data to create my list. I love it. I think it's fantastic. It's like for me, it's like it's the feels. Do I feel good about it? What do I think? And Nathan's like, I don't care what I feel or think. I just need the data. And as long as the data backs me up, we're going to go with it.
Well, Nathan avoided that slippery slope of just using the BGG ranking, because if you watched our episode about that, you know how we honestly feel about that.
Right.
So also, side note to something that you said, Peter, are we allowed to look at the price of games before we buy them?
Are we allowed? I have to. Too many games have not made it to my personal shelf because of the price.
And I don't think ranking necessarily correlates to what we're talking about too strongly, because ranking is how well people liked it, as opposed to how many people actually knows about it, is where I think we're trying to get more at. Not very good English there, but
kind of. But what you're saying, that's the second part that I use to build my list of games is, I'm a member of a couple different board game groups on like Facebook and stuff like that, and just seeing the topics of conversation, talking about the different games that are coming out. And once you ignore the noise for the latest and greatest, which is always going to be the number one thing that they're going to be talking about, you see all the different things that people are talking about with older games that, I just got this game to the table, or we just played X game for the, fifth time. And watching those for a little bit since we put this, topic onto our, schedule, even though a game may be rated high, there's two games that I have that, have a under 1,000 BGG ranking that I put on my list because they're good games, so they're going to get good ratings, but I don't think that they're, well known about enough, that they would be off the hidden gem list, because I don't see them talked about enough yet.
Yeah,
Name names.
Oh, I can't talk about it yet because we're not into that conversation yet.
I actually generated a fairly big list, and you'd be surprised at some of the games that actually don't seem to be well known. But we could talk about that maybe after we talk about our list. I can talk about a few that I was surprised by.
I mean, it's pretty clear how a game cannot be a hidden gem, right? It's either plastered all over all the major like online retailers, right? And or it's the new hotness, right? People talking about whatever they saw at the last convention. Stuff like that is definitely not hidden gems, right?
My number one hidden gem, Gloomhaven, period.
That's a great game, but not a hidden gem.
It might be hidden from Peter's shelf since he looks at price, apparently.
Well, so would the Oathsworn that I've been playing. That's not cheap.
I saw that one. I saw a couple copies of it go up for sale on some trade, but I was like, oh, that's yeah.
Nowadays, if it's Kickstarter, it's gonna be expensive, especially if it's a Kickstarter's minis game. But
all in pledges.
Maybe I should start. I'm just gonna do the top 5 with the biggest difference between my rating and how well known they are. And I'll start with Yellow and Yancey, which is one of the ones that actually surprised me that it's not that well known. Now I was looking at anything under 10,000 ratings. So only 2,000 people have actually rated Yellow and Yancey's, which is compared to like Blood Rage, which has I think there was 45,000. Some of them get 60, 70,000, but so 2,000 is really not much. Now, if you don't know about Yellow and Yancey, it is a reimagining of Tigris and Euphrates, which is a much better, it's a better known game. But Yellow and Yancey's takes Tigris and Euphrates and just tweaks it a little bit to make it a little less swingy, because in Tigris and Euphrates, you can do one action and wipe out half the board. Because what you're doing in this game is you're laying down tiles, and the tiles come in 4 different colors. So you can do black, red, blue, or some other color. And you have to have a leader attached to that section of the board that tile is placed in to be able to score for that color. And so every time you're placing tiles, you're scoring points of a specific color, but the color you have the fewest points of at the end of the game is what you score on. Now, the thing that makes it interesting is if you place a leader in a section that somebody already has a leader in, then you have internal conflict. You use red tiles to do battle, and you can get red points for winning internal conflict. However, if you connect 2 sections by placing a tile between 2, you're having a major battle between 2 whole kingdoms, and every matching leader then does conflict. And you're doing conflict in whatever colors the leaders you match. And you can choose which colors you want to do battle with in first. So if you say, okay, let's do battle with all the blues. So each kingdom is going to count how many blues they have in their kingdom. They can throw more blues from their hand to add to the battle. And then the losing side loses a leader, and every single blue tile on their side goes away. And the winning guy gets points for every single tile he removed and for the leader that he removed. If the kingdoms are still connected after that battle, you would do another battle for whatever colors of leaders are still connected. So if the reds were still connected, you can do battle. It can also mean you're causing battles between other players that you're not necessarily involved in. So it's really cool, but because of the fact you remove all the tiles of a color after a battle, you can wipe out a big section of the board and really drastically change the game state by placing one single tile. Yellow and Yancey's does that same concept, but just mitigates the massive swings. It gives a little extra power. So if you're placing blue tiles, if you place a certain number, in a sequence, you get an extra power or so forth. And just slightly reduce the intense conflict and makes it more of a personal strategy and trying to protect yourself and just attack and kind of take opportunities where you can, but not necessarily go all out to attack. Have any of you played this game? Either of these games?
I have heard of both. I have never played either one of them.
Yeah, I've never played either. And so I'm assuming here that the reason why this is a hidden gem is because its older brother, Tigris and Euphrates, is so much more famous that people gravitate to that game first. But
yeah, I believe so.
You believe that this is the better design / implementation because of the tweaks?
It is. I don't know. I swap back and forth which one I like more. It's kind of like my mood of the day. I like them both, and if I want something highly aggressive, I will go to a Tigris and Freddy. If I want more strategy and more planning, I'll go for Yellow and Yancey. But yes, I could definitely see that. Whereas Tigris Freddy is very well known, and it's been around long enough that people have kind of already talked about. They've played it. They've got, okay, that's an old hack. So they didn't necessarily pay as much attention, I think, to Yellow and Yancey.
Now, isn't there either a viewer a playthrough on the channel that was it by you or by James that did? If I remember, I think I remember seeing it on there.
Yes, he did a digital playthrough.
Okay. So I guess if you want to kind of check it out, you can go see that one there. I'll throw one out here.
Okay.
So I'm going to mention one that isn't a hidden gem, but it will lead into my hidden gem of it. So, and it's actually a miniature game. So X-Wing. So X-Wing is familiar to a lot of people. Tabletop miniature game there, collect your ships, plot movements and stuff like that. Well, the one that I'm going to talk about is actually two games together. So I'm going to talk where they got the movement from. So the movement system for X-Wing and a lot of the components and how it works came from an older game called Wings of Glory and also Wings of War. So both those games, they're historical based games, either World War I or World War II aircraft. And what's really cool about it is you collect your planes that you're going to use, and depending on the plane, it has a special movement deck on it. And as you play it, in order to move, you select your speed, and then you play a card, and that's if it's going to move forward, bank left, bank right. You have your hand of your cards, and you play them out. You play them face down. Once everyone chooses their movement, they turn them over, and everyone moves simultaneously. So you have to kind of visually look how you're moving, guesstimate where you're going to end up based off of your card, and then hope that you can keep your opponent in your gun sights. So those games never took off super. They were fantastic games. They worked so well. It worked so well to the point that X-Wing took a lot of the components for those games and put them into theirs. And X-Wing's in its second print or second edition now. That's a whole separate thing of how that worked out. But those were two great games. The price points weren't that high. It was super easy to learn. They were fantastic. If you wanted to dip your toe into historical, or if you just wanted to, have aircraft to shoot at each other with. But it never took. But it was so good though that, like I said, a major company came in, took components for it, and used it for their own game.
I find this very interesting because, like, Nathan's example of Yellow and Yancey was an older system that was refined to be a slightly better system, and it's the older system that's the more popular of the game. In your case, we have an older system in the Wings of Glory and Wings of War that was refined eventually into X-Wing, and it's obviously the later incarnation of the system that is the more popular of the two. So I just find it interesting that it could go both ways there.
It's definitely the power of the IP, I feel, is definitely what pushed it. I mean, when you get into historical, like, as much as I love all that stuff, it is a small niche of people that enjoy that. If you look at that versus the global appeal that is Star Wars, hands down, Star Wars is going to win.
Yeah, it's target market, because I mean, while you probably hate to admit it, wargaming is a little bit more niche. Where if you fantasy, I think it was Fantasy Flight that did X-Wing, which is a well-known board game publisher that's has a broader appeal to war gamers as well as hobby gamers and other people.
Now I will state that Star Wars in general, historical miniatures, because right at the beginning of the crawl, a long time ago, it says it right there, historical.
All right. I guess I'll just start by talking about the most recent hidden gem for me. And that was the game, oh boy, I'm going to butcher it again. Serenissima, was it? So I've mentioned this on the show before, but like this is a review copy that James forwarded to me. I'm not even sure if he played it before he forwarded it to me, but I opened it up, read the rules. We played 2 games, I think now, and we found it to have a very interesting opportunity cost in terms of what you're doing in the game. I mean, basically you're shipping goods in the Mediterranean. So the theme is not necessarily new, but you've got reasonable choices to make about where to ship your goods, because each port can only hold a certain number of goods before it becomes full. If someone's trying to set up a port so they can build a basilica there, which is worth an extra 5 victory points, you can ship goods there to fill up the port so that it can't have both gold and marble, which it needs to build the basilica. You can set up a fort to have. You can set up a port to have a fort in it, which gives it additional defensive opportunities. Your ships can have low numbers of crew members to ship more goods, or high number of crew members to move fast across the map and wreck other people, which is definitely a part of the game. And then the game's got a quasi variable length, because you go around this clock mechanism, and the clock mechanism triggers the ships in order because all the ships are numbered. And once all the ships have acted, then you reveal a card, and the card will tell you whether the time track moves forward 0, 1, or 2 spaces, basically. And that's how the game progresses and how you get hit scoring rounds, and eventually it'll end. But we went into this not expecting much, because it was a hand-me-down game, and it turned out to have a lot of interesting moving pieces inside. So there's an example for you.
Yeah, that's kind of brings up another interesting thought of theme and kind of getting lost in the shuffle of so many of the same theme. Trading the Mediterranean being one of the most common themes in Eurogaming. So yeah, it's having a unique theme can be a huge selling point, even if it's not a great game.
This is also an example of just shifting expectations. A hidden gem can be just about any game where you have where you go in with a low or no expectation, and it turns out rather well. Expectations can go in the other direction, which ends up to be something else that we might discuss in some future episode. But for now, let's talk about hidden gems.
So it's because I hate that I always feel like I'm explaining it, but because I've not played a ton of games, I told the guys, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find any that I feel games that I have played that I feel like are going to fit this criteria of not well known, or however we define a hidden gem. But as you guys were talking, especially you talk about games that have not been rated very often on BGG, or games that are maybe from a smaller publisher. Maybe they didn't get a long print run. The first game that popped into my mind was Combo Fighter, which got a fair bit of buzz a couple of years back, but it also ran into production issues. It ran into all sorts of stuff. I know that it was a Kickstarter, I believe. And as soon as the Kickstarter print run was done, you could not get a hold of the game. I did luck out and was able to get one of the box sets. Sadly, I think the one that I got only comes with 2 fighters. So each fighter in the game is a deck of cards. And it is it's a paper, rock, scissor mechanic. And the idea is that it's just it's supposed to be nostalgic. It's supposed to remind you of playing the arcade games where you're just button mashing and you are fighting against each other. But the way it is, you're playing your cards and your paper, rock, scissoring. So if you play a specific type of card, it's going to block another card. So if the player plays the right card, you're blocking them. Or if you play the right card, then you get a punch in. And you're dwindling the other player's deck of cards, because when they're out of cards, they're going to lose. So it is a really interesting, it's not supposed to be super big on strategy. It's luck a lot of the time, unless you're really good at figuring out the other player about what they would do next. And the idea is that you're picking your next card pretty quick. You're not taking a lot of time to put too much thought into it. And I found it to be really fun. But again, because I ended up with one of the boxes that just has 2 fighters, I'm limited to those 2 decks. And so even for me, it's still a bit of a hidden gem, because I can play it with those 2 decks. And then I can only imagine what it would have been like to play with all the other decks. It is a game that's easy and quick to teach and fun to play if you liked those style of arcade games. And you get to see it in a different format with it being, and there are other card games out there that have done this. But I found this one to be a lot of fun. They give a little bit of story for the characters. So you get that little bit of, not role play, but you get that added flavor text thrown in there for each of the characters, and their deck of cards reflects their story. So you're going to have one deck of cards that's all about the fighter, he's more of the wrestling, grappling type. And then you've got the other one who's all about the flow and the tai chi of things, where it's all about using the other characters' abilities against them. And so it's all about turning the tides and using their momentum against them, which actually was fairly well done with a deck of cards. So I feel like there was a good bit of thought and heart that went into the game that made it really well done. But sadly, it's not easily or readily available. So for me, that was fitting the criteria of what you guys were saying there, and it was a game that I've played and did really enjoy, and wish I was able to get a hold of a few more of those decks of cards.
I think its popularity actually hurt it, because this was a game, as you said, it's like a game that it came out, people talked about it quite a bit when it came out, but nobody could get it.
Yeah.
And people got frustrated and people just stopped talking about it. And this is a type of game that, I mean, it's not quite collectible card game, but it's in the same kind of concept of, if you don't push out content constantly with this type of game, you're dead on the vine.
Yeah. And again, I mean, it made a big enough splash that, like you said, a few other of the channels out there, some of the bigger, well-known ones, were talking about it and reviewing it and saying that they really liked it. But again, they just didn't put out even of just enough copies of the base game, just didn't get made. And then I don't know, it seemed like I think it got sold to another company. And then there was talk about that company putting out another print run, and I never saw that actually happen. So I don't know. I don't know if all of a sudden being very small, but then becoming kind of really popular hurt it. Instead of that being a plus, it became a minus. I don't know.
And that's a problem sometimes with the small company Kickstarters, because a lot of time their margins into that, don't have much more than what is going to be going out to backers. Will have some extra for that. So if a game hits unexpectedly for them, what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely.
So bearing them out in mind, and the fact that a lot of the popular games are getting like 30, 40,000 ratings. How many ratings do you think the most popular deck of this game got?
It's got to be in the hundreds, not in the thousands, right?
Yeah, 527.
Yeah. So not a lot.
That is nothing.
Not a lot. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, because it got talked about quite a bit. And then to see that, it was less than 1,000 ratings just blew my mind. And it stinks because, again, it's a good game. If that's your style of game, it's well done. But you're not going to find it anywhere at this point, which just is sad.
Yeah. I've seen games that haven't been released get 1,000 ratings.
Right.
And this one, like I said, what do they do? If they have an unexpected hit and they need to get more copies up, but they don't have the margins to do that, what do they do? I mean, that can be a whole separate topic for us to talk about too, because I mean, how many games have we seen that, went through a Kickstarter, maybe a second run, and then had to sell to another company, and then poof, magically disappeared.
So I got one to talk about that's really almost as low as Peter's as far as the ratings. But it's a game that kind of worked against itself in it's the mechanics that they chose to use. It's because it's a real-time game with economics and negotiation. And, the economic gamers and the heavy Euro gamers generally run screaming away from anything real time. I've done that in the past too. So, and I know James does too. So just the idea of a real time economic, for most people, that's a no-go. But anyways, this game is time and space. And I have talked about this before. It also suffers from being one of the ugliest covers I've ever seen. It's a super green, odd looking aliens and odd looking spaceships that don't really look appealing at all. But the game itself is well paced. So what happens is you get sand timers and you are basically performing a task, and then you put a sand timer on there when you start the task. Then you can do other things and plan while you wait for that sand timer to run out. Once that runs out, you start your next task. And as you upgrade your ship and do trades and sell and buy things, you can start getting more sand timers. And it gets to, when you get later in the game, you get a nice rhythm where it doesn't feel like you're rushing necessarily. You're just kind of, okay, do this, finish this, let's do this. And you're just kind of constantly moving, but not feeling stressed.
I remember you talking about that mostly because of the cover. And I remember looking it up and going, oh, that is awful.
It is green. It is very, very, very green. Ugh. It's like they know of maybe 2 colors in their palette.
You can't unsee it.
Yeah, this is the game that I'm like, this should almost be a mobile game where you just do something and then there's a timer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna talk about one here, and this is actually one that on BGG's ratings, it's top 700. So the game I'm going to talk about is a game called Xlibris. So in the game, you're a rare book collector, as with every other player on the board, and the position of Grand Librarian is open. So you have to expand your library to become the best library to get the prestigious title of Grand Librarian. And in the game, so you have a hand of cards, and on the cards there are a whole different bunch of different sets of types of books. I believe it's like 6 different categories of books, and you have to collect them and put them into your shelf, but you have to put them into the shelf alphabetically for ease of looking at for everyone. Now, as you're doing that, unless your specific person, which they all have different powers, allows you to, once you put it on your shelf, you can't move those books again. So you have to manage how you're putting the books. You can't put them in any specific place or any place you want. You have to build your shelf on top of itself, so otherwise it would fall over. And you have 3 rows that your shelf can be, but it can be as many wide as you want. Now, to collect the different books in the game, there's, I think, 20 or 30 different locations that you're going to go to that have different ways that you can procure books. And all these different locations have different themes to them. There's like a gambling house, an auction house, a divination hut, and each one has a specific thing that you do to get books out of there. And a lot of times the books are face up so you can see what's on there, but some of them are also face down, so you're gambling on what you're going to get. So, and the game is not hard to learn. It's super simple. You look at the artwork on the cover and it's iffy. The artwork in the game is really good though. There's some choices into it that's not that great. So what's really cool is on all the cards that have the books, every book has a unique title onto it, and a lot of them are hilarious. But the font that they use on it makes it next to impossible to read unless you are right on top of it. So not great choice there, but if you can actually get a chance to read the covers of the books, they're fantastic. The players that you can play as, they're not exactly the most balanced. Some are a little more powerful than others, unfortunately. But the game is just fun. It's so fun to play. And it has a really good rating, even though it doesn't have a whole lot of plays on there. Yeah, it's rated 697. So it's rated fairly well for the game. It came out quite a few years ago, 2017. And it was popular that year, won a couple awards, and then everybody stopped talking about it. I see it pop up on the rare occasion on a buy-sell group, and usually copies for it are going for a fairly pretty penny because nobody really wants to get rid of their game. And it is definitely a game that Peter needs to play at some point because he is our librarian.
I was going to say, if nothing else, the theme sounds like it. I have to play it at least once.
Now,
I got it from my wife.
Pete will wipe the floor with us, or he will flip the table out of frustration for forcing him to do what he does at work. One of these two things will happen.
It sounds likely.
Yeah, I would say this is a nice, fun little game. I think it does the same thing with family games. It's like they tend to like pop up and get talked about and then get a little bit forgotten. If they had done an expansion to keep that momentum going, that would have been really helpful. It would also allow them to give the ability to like make it a little bit more complicated as you go, so that you can kind of get the gamers more involved. So it's like the hobbyists can say, oh, okay, well, if I'm playing with people who played it before, let's do the expansion, or let's just try a quick game with somebody who has never played it before and just do the base game.
And that's one thing that I thought about with this game. And it's kind of odd because the publisher is Renegade Game Studios, which is a fairly well-known company. And I don't know if it just didn't generate enough revenue or whatnot for them that they didn't do anything with it, or what, it's hard to say. But it's a game that they could have easily done expansions for, because with the deck of book cards that come into it, it's a fairly substantial deck. You don't really need to add more to that. All you really need to do is add more place locations or more, player meeples to make an expansion at the very bare minimum. So it would have been really low hanging fruit to do, and they didn't do it. So I don't know what was going on with them at that time. Hard to say.
They could have done like the I'm drawing a blank. The spy game where you have to call out how many numbers of a certain word are matching the word that you're trying to describe. Oh wow.
Mastermind?
No. The one where it's like you have a pattern that you have to that matches you, and then your opponent has a pattern, and you have to get people to pick the cards that match your pattern on your team, and you can say, okay, I have 4 words that relate to this word. Guess which words I'm talking about. You know what a game I'm talking about now, right?
I do not. I do not know which one we're talking about.
Code names.
Yes, code names. So they could have done that strategy of releasing the same game but putting different IPs on it, like they did with Disney code names, Marvel code names, and whatnot, and done the same thing. They just have like different book sets.
And they could have done that for this fairly easily too.
Yeah, they could have easily done like an all fantasy expansion, right?
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it doesn't play long, which is great too. I mean, it's I think they say BGG is like 45 minutes. I think we usually get the game in about an hour.
No, that's good. That's a good amount of time.
What do you got, Dan?
Well, if it's my turn to name another game, I will name a game. I will name my favoriteest game, one of my favoriteest games ever. I can't say it's my favorite. So for those who haven't been keeping track, Fortune and Glory, the Cliffhanger game, also known as Indiana Jones in the Box, is a giant coffin-sized box. Now, because it is a giant coffin-sized box, this game has not seen any additional content for some number of years, and the base game has been out of print for even longer. The company that's responsible for it, Flying Frog Games, is busy pumping out Shadows and Brimstone left and right, because that's the game that's keeping their company afloat. So I can't really fault them for that. They got to stay in business. But yeah, so this game is probably a hidden gem by now because it's great, it's excellent, and it's 100% unavailable everywhere. Probably, I haven't actually looked into this, but you'll only be able to find like pre-owned copies at this point, I'm pretty sure.
And it's an interesting game. I mean, we did get a chance to play it at one point, so you can see us playing it on the channel. But like you said, Dan, if you can't find it out there, if you can't get a hold of it, it's rough.
Yeah, I mean, you have to go out of your way to track this down, which is sort of why it is, in my opinion, a hidden gem.
Mm-hmm.
So, Peter, did you have anything that came to mind while we were talking, or should I?
I've got at least one other one.
Okay.
And I'm gonna dip into my area of role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games for this one. And there are a ton of hidden gems out there in this category. If you are not one of the bigger publishing companies in the area of role-playing games, you can very easily get lost. And so there are a bunch of websites out there that self-published role-playing games can get put, and some very small ones that you can get for just like a couple bucks for a downloadable PDF. So this is the thing with these, is that it's not that they're not readily available. You just go to the right website, pay $5, and you've got a downloadable copy of the game. They're fairly inexpensive. It's just knowing where to find them and finding out about them, because they're not, like I said, they're not being made by companies that can really do huge marketing campaigns. So there's quite a few of those. And I just wanted to mention one of them. The one that I'm going to mention isn't as hard to find as some of the other ones. but I want to mention it because I think it's a fantastic tabletop role-playing game, and it's called For the Dungeon. And so some of you may have heard of it because it had a Kickstarter and the Kickstarter was successful. But then after that, I've not heard a whole lot of people talking about it because, again, if you're not coming out with a ton of content, it can very quickly just fall by the wayside. And this one has done that. They had a successful Kickstarter. It's a fun game to play. That's it. Go out there and find it if you can find it, or if you hear somebody talk about it, or maybe you got a friend who found it and they want to run it for you. But For the Dungeon is a D6 system. And the premise of the game, and it's not the only game that does this, but it does it incredibly well, is that you are a minion. You are one of the hirelings of a new and up-and-coming big bad. And it is your job to help them rise in the ranks of baddom. Help them establish their dungeon, their lair, and stop those pesky adventurers from coming in and looting all of your junk and killing off all of your fellow minions. And so it is a very fun. It is meant to be silly, nowhere near dark, but it's fantasy. I will tell you, I personally played a kobold MacGyver character, who was all about creating traps from like twigs and pieces of wire. And it is just, if you're looking for a game that you can sit down and learn very quickly, has a very small set of rules. So you're gonna learn it in less than probably 30 minutes with your friends, and then you're gonna have one person who's just gonna run it for you and come up with the story. I think this is a very well done, silly role-playing game, where you get to stick it to the adventurers. So I will just tell you that in our party, we had my kobold MacGyver character. We had a person who came to the table saying they wanted to play a troll. And I think in their mind, it was like the shambling troll, kind of like creepy character. But all of us, since we knew the vibe of the game was supposed to be silly, saw nothing but the like 80s troll toys with the little jewel belly buttons that you rubbed. And so that's what they became. And one of their abilities was like, once a game, if you wanted something to happen, you could rub that belly button and the thing would happen. And it was hilarious. It was fantastic. They had the big stick up hair and they could hide things in it because they were ginormous. It was fantastic. And we had somebody else who played, if anybody here knows Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, who doesn't, they played one of the teenage, like disenfranchised like teenagers who all of a sudden gets pulled into this weird samurai ninja cult thing. And now they just want to go home. It fell apart and they just want to go home. And then somebody else played a gelatinous ooze. And so it was this misfit band of minions trying to help their terrible boss become the new big bad. A really, really fun game. If you're out there and you're only playing the role-playing game that's out there, and trust me, I play it too, and it's awesome. I enjoy it. There are other really great hidden gem role-playing games out there that you can find, and you should do yourself a favor and go play some of them. Some of them fit literally in a brochure. You can read it in less than 20 minutes, and they're great games. Another one, I'll quickly mention it, is the Journey to the Whispering Tree. It's literally just a pamphlet, but you can use that to have a wonderful one-shot. So those two, For the Dungeon Journey to the Whispering Tree. I'm going to throw those out there as hidden gems in the vast world of role-playing games that just don't get talked about enough.
I want to play as a troll doll just so I can play as a character that still has all their hair.
Love it.
So it's an interesting thing talking about the RPGs there, Peter, because you have with that, once the rule book is written, you have it. It's done. So then you have sites like Drive Through RPG where you can sell, like you said, $5-10 you can get it. So I think that they run into the same problem though, just like board games though, that they're just overshadowed by the big company. So unless you have the marketing, people are never going to know about the games, unfortunately. But I know there are a lot of gems out there that you can get for a couple bucks. I know my shelves have a few of the other RPG, games other than the big one that you play, or, I have one that starts with P here, like right next to me that I'm going to play on Saturday. But, and Free League, has been giving us a lot of stuff, and a lot of their stuff has been fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that they're talked about well enough. I just gave you a set that was fantastic. And there are a lot of good stuff out there, and you can get into some of that stuff. Like we said, just $5-10, Drive Through RPG, you can get it. You have it then. And it's great for those companies too, because they're not putting out, manufacturing this, that's all that.
Yeah.
It's a PDF.
If you want to go out there and support some just lone game creators, itch.io, itch.io, is a fantastic website that just tons of self-made games get published on, and you can get lost for a good long time. And hopefully if you go on there, you'll find your next hidden gem. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I know Drive Through RPG gets talked about a lot because it's become pretty well known, but itch.io is it's kind of the same idea, but it's a lot easier for self-made games to just get thrown up there for some low cost. And they've got more than just role-playing games on there. There's a lot of stuff that's actually on there. So you can check that out.
So you're saying the site's a hidden gem itself?
The site itself, I think, is a hidden gem. I mean, I feel like only certain people in the area of this culture talk about it. So I'll throw that out there as another hidden gem, itch.io.
So yeah, I'll continue on with my next one. And my next one is part of I would consider it a failed world building attempt. It's the Among the Stars series. They basically were trying to create a number of games that are kind of go in the same universe, and each one progressively was less well known, partially because they drastically changed the genre of games that each game was in. So the first one was the best known, which is Among the Stars, and that was a good. I think it was kind of a deck building style game that was nice and light, a little bit of a city building element, and I like that game all right. I really love the next game in the series, which is almost unknown, which is New Dawn. The problem is that is an economic strategy game that's slightly abstract. There is a little bit of combat in this game, but it's mostly focusing on playing cards for resources, managing your resources to be able to play better cards later, and buy cards from the the market. But because it was such a drastically different game than the first game, I think people were thrown by it. They were expecting something similar to the original game. The next game they made in the series was even worse. It was actually a pretty bad game, in my opinion. It was a straight dexterity game where you're throwing cards randomly throwing cards on the table that are spaceships and taking little rubber bands and trying to make them hit the other cards. Like, how'd they go from a really solid economic strategy game to flicking rubber bands? Where is the connection there? How is this the same universe? How is this the same series of games? But back to New Dawn, which in my opinion is a really great game, but it is somewhat abstract. So basically you're taking tiles, and when you place them, depending on how you face them, you get bonus resources. You get whatever resources you get from the card, plus whichever way they're facing, that gets you bonuses. And you're using that later to play more cards. That's basically the game. New Dawn.
Yeah, I played Among the Stars, which was the drafting, building your space station game. Didn't know there was even a series.
Yeah, the last one is Stellar Conflict, and if you want to get really annoyed, play that one.
Sounds
When you
like
play
you
with
missed out
kids,
on a
though-
dexterity game.
I was gonna say, do you feel like the reason that this game is then a hidden gem, like because they kept coming out with stuff and it progressively got worse?
I think it's just false expectations when they establish this as a universe.
Oh, okay.
People knew it was part of this universe when they released it. They were expecting a variation of the same game
Yeah.
and didn't get it.
Okay. So then just because of that, like the earlier better games are kind of just, they fall to the wayside because they didn't follow through on their initial idea that they sold.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, if you think you're getting one thing and you're constantly finding out that you're not going to get it, I mean, that can put a bad taste in your mouth and you kind of fall off. And it stinks because you've got a game, an earlier game that is it, like you said, a good solid game, but it falls to the wayside because of these lost expectations.
So I'm going to talk about actually in this 4 games together. So they are put out by a studio called Capital Gains Studio, a very small company actually out of Singapore. And the 4 games you're going to talk about is Deadzilla, Wongamania, Banana Republic, Cryptocurrency, and Zombie Life Insurance. So the theme of all those games is actually basically adult style themes of, each one. Zombie Life Insurance talks about the how life insurance works and teaches you that the benefits, pros and cons of it in a game. Cryptocurrency, the same exact thing, the pros and benefits and cons of getting into crypto mining and the crypto everything. Wongamania talks about actually just like governments, the engine of creating and selling goods, and Deadzilla is obtaining debt and how to relieve yourself of debt in a fun way. And all their games, they're not great games, but they're not terrible games either. I've played 3 of them, but what they do is teach those concepts very well. Like you could play them one time and you have a better understanding of what that game is trying to teach you with it. And it's a really interesting take by a board game company to do something like that. Like it's going to teach you, the importance of financial responsibility with Deadzilla, or, do I need life insurance or not leave life insurance, by talking about, that in a zombie apocalypse with a game. So it's really cool that they can do something with that. And they're actually branching out into another area. They're actually going to do some science games. They just kickstarted a dinosaur game into their science kind of area. So they're going to do a couple games into that. So I think it's really cool. And it's kind of, if it's something that you want to kind of learn about, it's not a game that you're ever going to hear about, like ever, but it exists and you can actually learn some, kind of important stuff by playing a game.
It's interesting because I have no doubts that there's a dearth or a complete lack of good games that also have educational content. This is a Venn diagram that's very, very thin.
And like the most recent one that I did was I played cryptocurrency, and it's really cool because there's 4 different currencies that are available in the game, and through different actions, the prices will go up and down just much, and almost with random factors too, just like into the real world crypto market. But as you play it, you're trying to get yours to go whatever you're invested in to go up. But with other things that are going to go down, and there's some hidden things that you won't know until the end of the game how to affect the market. And if yours is the lowest valued cryptocurrency at the end, it completely goes bust and you have lost everything. So you're banking on some information that you don't even know about, much like how it actually really works. And it's just kind of really cool. And you have to hire people that would do the data mining for you to get you more crypto coin. It does a good job teaching you of how the entire thing works. And what's really cool too is you come with 2 books in each game. One book is how to teach you the rules, and one is all about just whatever topic that is.
So I had a little bit of emotional roller coaster going when you're talking about this. Well, first off, it's like, oh, I've heard of this game. Oh, I heard of it from your review. Okay. I was looking at it. It's okay. Like, yeah, this is definitely a hidden gem. There's the most ratings for any of these games is 61. But then I was looking at the names, and I was like, I met an Andy Chu in Singapore. There's no way this is the same person, but it could be. I don't know. It's like
I forgot you lived there for a little bit.
Yeah, I was in Singapore for 6 years.
Yeah, right. Okay, that'd be really funny if this is the same person, though. That would be funny.
I don't really have a way to find out anymore.
Yeah. But I like the idea. I really do love the idea of games that teach important real world topics. And so it does stink that these are hidden gems. These are much smaller, not as well-known games, especially if, like you're saying, they teach it well. Because I think there's a lot of games out there that have tried to teach real world concepts that are important, and either the game is awful or it just doesn't actually, you don't feel like you learned anything at the end. It didn't do a good enough job teaching the subject. And so to know that there's games out there that are pretty well made and do a good job of teaching it, but there's just like, they're not getting talked about. They're not well known. So that's tough. Because there's a lot of games out there that we're just playing games. We're just playing games. We're not learning anything. We're just playing and enjoying games, and that's okay. But it's cool to know that there are people out there who are trying to make games that are going to teach really important concepts.
Yeah, it's really neat that they went that route, because you really don't see that out there a lot. And like you said, or you don't see ones that do it well. There's a lot of games that will try and teach you stuff, but they just implement it terribly. And a really cool thing with them too is they're based out of Singapore. So when they pop up on Kickstarter, usually the game's 36 Singapore dollars, which the conversion rate is next to nothing American. So I can get a game that teaches me a good, concept that, I probably should know, and I don't have to pay a whole lot to do it.
At one point in time, I was doing research on various kinds of games, and I wanted to find a game that does deck wrecking. So deck wrecking is the deck building mechanic where you tear apart your deck because it's only filled with junky cards, right? So it turns out there's not too many games that even have deck wrecking in them as their core mechanism. But one of the two is Xenon Profiteer. The one that I feel is the better representation of this mechanic is Abandon All Artichokes. Abandon Artichokes is a very simple game. It's one deck of cards. The game comes in a tin, and it's just really simple. There's a central market filled with a bunch of non-artichoke vegetables that manipulate cards in various ways, allow you to draw cards, discard cards, get rid of artichokes, of course. And then, of course, your starting deck is nothing but artichokes. Nothing but artichokes. And of course, at the end of your turn, you're supposed to discard your hand like you do in any deck building game and draw 5 new cards. And if at this point in time, none of your 5 cards are artichokes, you've won. That's how the game ends, is you either fill your deck with enough non-artichokes to pull that off, or call enough artichokes to make that happen, or both. But like, really simple mechanisms. There's no currencies in this game to acquire new cards. It's just you get a new garden card once per turn. So highly accessible. And probably does deck wrecking as a mechanism the best, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, this is an interesting example of a hidden gem because it's different approach. It is mass market, actually. It is pretty well known to the mass market, but I think in the hobby game industry, it is not as well known because it's mass market. Because there is definitely a distancing away from games that are considered mass market, so it's assumed they're not going to be very good quality. It's just churned out stuff, pulp. But
I think you're absolutely right here, Nathan, is that this is sort of like a hidden gem because the hobby market is going to ignore this game because it's just a small card game.
But yeah, I've actually heard about this quite a bit, but not from anybody in the hobby. Yeah, Peter, did you have any?
No, I'm out at this point.
Okay, so I want to talk about another game I've talked about before. This is definitely a nostalgia game for me that is pretty well unknown. It's a game called Ming. Now, this is a card game that I've played all the time when I was a kid, and it's basically they've taken Mahjong and converted it to take some of the betting make the betting optional, so you don't have to gamble to make this a fun game. And they've encouraged you to kind of go fast and you're trying to make sets, but it's not a simple, you want 3 of a kind, you want 5 of a kind. You need a specific combination for all of your cards to be able to go out. So you're going to have 14 cards, and if you go out and you don't have a set that made out of these 14 cards that's worth any points, you may get 0 points. However, if you do really well, you can get over 1,000 points in a single hand. So there's a trade-off between, okay, I can pick up this card and I can make a set to go out. Do I want to? Does that actually benefit me? What are other people working on? Are there something they're working on something big? Do I want to go out just to keep them from doing something big and like winning this game in a single hand? So there's a lot of that. It's like, because it's like, okay, you get, if you have like a 1 through 9 of a suit, that's worth a lot of points. Or if you have all your cards are above 5, that's like odd combinations like that get you points. But on average, people will score like 10, maybe 64 points in a round, and you play until you get to like 600. But it is entirely possible to get that in a single round. Oh, and if the person goes out, nobody else scores.
Also, you just lose the points that you would have gained.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's a high tension, and it's like Mahjong in that you can only pick up cards on your turn. You can draw from the deck, but otherwise you can call if you have a set, but it's priority in turn order or type of set. So there's certain sets that are stronger, like a sequence has certain strength, but if you have a triplets, that's worth more. So if you call a sequence, but they call triplets, they get the card, not you.
Sounds like a more cutthroat version of Mahjong.
I don't know. Well, some of the people I've seen play Mahjong, that can be a nasty game.
Well, so with this being a hidden gem, for you, I mean, this is the first time I've ever heard you mention it. I mean, I don't remember you mentioning it previously anyways. So all of a sudden I wonder, like, is this a game that you're like, I need to introduce the group to?
Not necessarily, because a certain amount of it is nostalgia.
Oh, okay.
It is a fun card game, but it's not the one that's like, it's a must have.
Okay.
And it's one of my favorite games, but mainly because I have so many memories attached to it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Is it one of those ones that you have a better appreciation if you've like played Mahjong a bunch?
No, I didn't play Mahjong for like a decade after I started playing this game.
I ask because growing up in my family, we played so much Mahjong. It's ridiculous.
Yep. Yeah. Mahjong can well, I have some stories that probably aren't good for air about something that you can have a literal cutthroat game of Mahjong. Like in China and Asia. They take it super seriously sometimes. You know, I mean, if you can lose everything you own in a single card game, yeah, people take it seriously. Anyways, let's move on.
I'm sorry, Nathan, what was the name of that one more time?
Ming. Mhing. It is, I'm pretty sure it's pretty much impossible to find. It was published only for a short while. In fact, my family loved it so much, we actually reached out to the publisher and they actually made an extra, like a small print run so we could get more copies of it.
So I was kicking around one of the last ones I was going to talk about, and I came up with a couple games that could fit this, what I was going to mention, but I'm suddenly on this title, but it covers this kind of thought. So the one that I'm going to mention is Libertalia. So Libertalia just had a reprint, but that's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about the previous first edition, the one that we did a playthrough a couple of months ago with. So Libertalia, it's a pirate themed game. Everyone has the same exact cards into their hand, and you're bidding for the different positions on the ship to collect the loot. You go through that a couple different times. If you want to see exactly how it plays, I think we have one or two playthroughs of that, on the channel itself. But I want to bring that one up because this game came out quite a few years ago, was extremely popular, and then you couldn't get it except for secondhand for an astronomical price. And then all of a sudden, a reprint happens, and everyone is talking about the game again, and it's readily available everywhere. And now the old editions that were selling for astronomical prices are now back to common prices. So, I mean, that's one of those hidden gems that was out there for a long time, and then it actually got the benefit of being picked up and reprinted by a different company and made it readily available and talked about again.
Yeah, the reprint actually doesn't have that many ratings yet, but it just came out this year. I think next year this will be so far above the original just because it is a great game. I haven't played the reprint yet, but I picked it up immediately. And you can't get the original, so why not get the reprint?
Yeah, and when the reprint was announced, like, they did such a good job of keeping it under wraps that they announced it, and it was like going out to the masses within like a week after that or something. Like, it was a ridiculously short time, and it was just everywhere on a lot of the board game stuff that I subscribed to, that everybody was talking about this. And then everyone was super excited that they're like, oh, it's actually coming out now.
I was gonna say, that's crazy, because every time you hear about a big game, it's like, okay, and now you get, you have to wait a year. But to be able to just immediately have that turnaround had to feel pretty good for a lot of people.
Yeah, Stonemeyer did a really good job with that one.
No different than Kickstarter.
You get your game eventually.
about 6 months to a year after we say we're delivering it.
All right, here we go, guys. So let's all talk about Shiver Me Timbers, folks. Sadly, tragically, James is the only one with a physical copy of Shiver Me Timbers. We all managed to play it online, I think, at least once.
Nope, not me.
Pete. Pete. We got to get him to the table.
I was out that week, sadly.
But Shiver Me Timbers is effectively Sid Meier the Pirates, the board game, in case you weren't already aware. It's a great sandbox experience where you can do like any one of like 8 different things that all manage to score some number of points at the end of the game. Some things are worth more points than others based on like the specific setup. So you sort of prioritize those. You kind of get to pick which objectives you want to aim for at the beginning that are going to be worth the most points to you. But otherwise it's a great little sandbox experience, and the physical game has got like a toyetic factor because the ship models like you pull them apart and add sections to indicate that they've got more cannons, sails, and hull are the 3 stats that ships can have. I've summed it up. Comments about Shiver Me Timbers?
Oh, I just remembered I did get to play it in person with James.
Oh, okay.
He brought it to CosCon in this last March, and I got to play. I didn't get to finish it because the game was going long and I had to leave. But it was a blast. And yes, and then all of a sudden I found, and then I remember James was like, "Oh yeah, and you're not going to be able to find this game anywhere." And I cried a little bit.
So as we talked about on our Discord, so apparently there are going to be expansions coming out by the manufacturer, and you will be able to get the base game also when he launches it.
Well, that's super exciting.
Are we actually allowed to talk about that? We'd have to find out from James, but he can always cut it if he can't.
Well, then we'll just edit it out.
Okay. But yeah, so I got to play it a little bit. It's a really, really incredibly fun game. I don't think I've played a ton of sandbox games. This is one of the few. I've played sandbox like video games, but few sandbox board games. And I felt like this one did it really well. It was exciting. It was fun. I thought the decisions that you get to make were very interesting. I loved building up the ship and watching other people get worried that I had so many guns on my ship. And they're like, okay, I'm going to stay way over here on this side of the board and do my thing. But no, it was very interesting, a very unique game for me to play. And it's definitely a hidden gem in the fact that it's hard to get, but if you get the chance to play it, a lot of fun.
Yeah, we talked about this game quite a bit on our top 10 games of all time. Peter had not yet played it at that point, but we all really love this game. And it's one of those ones that definitely is a hidden gem because it only, if you look at the BGG, it's only got 264 ratings, so like almost nothing. It's pretty well unheard of, but almost all those ratings are 8 or higher. So the few people who have gotten this to play this game have loved it. So I'm really excited to eventually get this for myself, hopefully. And I want everybody to have this game.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to my next chance to play it.
So it is definitely a really good hidden gem. A lot of the Facebook groups, you'll see somebody that's looking for recommendations for, a game of some sort. And one that I see pop up a lot is, does anybody know any good pirate themed games? And you'll see a lot of stuff that pops in there, like Tiny Epic Pirates or Endeavor or stuff like that. Libertalia, all good games. And then buried down 60 some comments in is going to be Shiver Me Timbers. And it'll have like 2 likes to a bunch of the other likes that are in there. Like, it doesn't have a lot of love. People just don't know this game exists. And it does. It is fantastic. It is great. And I will also say, going into one of our future topics that we're going to talk about, as you said, Dan, it is Sid Meier Pirates in a board game. So all of you IP people out there, take a look at this game. This is how you do an IP, even though this is not really an IP game, but you take the things that make the IP great, distill it down to a core of what works, and put it in the game. And you will have a good game.
Yeah, and I think
step up my soapbox now.
I think a lot of the reason why it's pretty well unknown is first time designer, first time publisher, with a very ambitious game that, I mean, when I looked at this game, I thought it wasn't going to be good because it was just seemed too ambitious, but it really knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, a lot of people were so nervous about that first time on there. Like, I just pulled up the Kickstarter. It only had 1,200 backers. And of those, I mean, I don't know how many were like, just $1 or €1, backers, because it only raised so much. Let's see. Yeah, like if you look at, the backing of it, there's not a lot of copies out there. And it's a shame.
Yeah, it didn't help. It wasn't a cheap game, but very few games on Kickstarter are. But it did have amazing production value. It had the little ships that you take apart. You can upgrade your ships and put them back together, put like better sails, more cargo space and all that. It's a really cool little toy factor to it too. So I think that wraps up our hidden gems on a really positive note and with an amazing game. We should move on to the little game I've prepared. Anyways, so can everybody see this image?
Yes.
Yep.
So in this game, it's going to be identify the game. And the way it's going to work.
I'm going to do terrible.
So bad.
The way it's going to work is I'll show you a picture. You'll take turns. So this game I'll use an example. Evan will say, okay, I will take a guess or he'll pass. So if you take a guess, if you pass, that's fine. Dan will then get a chance to guess what this game is or pass. However, if you guess what this game is and are wrong, Dan will then get to guess, but he gets an easier image. So a wider shot.
Okay. All right.
So if you're not sure, you may not want to guess because you may not want to give the next person an easier image. And so there'll be 3 images for each game. If nobody gets it by the 3rd image, I'll just have to tell you. But you should. This game is pretty new. You guys may not have played it yet. So
I know it.
Evan, what do you think it is?
It's Ark Nova.
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay. Well done. Nice.
Evan will go first. Now,
yay!
The better known the game is, the more difficult I made the initial picture.
Oh, so, you're the worst.
Evan, what do you think this game is? Do you want to guess or pass?
I would like to pass.
Dan, would you like to guess?
on this piece of the garbage? No way. Nah, I'm not passing this. I have no clue. It's a bunch of garbage.
It could be anything.
Well, one, let's do some deduction here. We know that it's a well-known game, probably to our group, which is why Nathan made it so hard. And I am going to guess that this is Blood Rage.
You are 100% correct.
Yes, I am. Because I have played this game so many times. I know this is the ocean off to like the side of the board.
Yes, and there's the wider picture.
Yes.
And the final image.
This is like it's like the one game I'm probably gonna get tonight. But I was like, I recognize that ocean. I've played this game so many times now. I love it. So good.
So that's 1 point for Peter. That was originally Evan's question. So we're going to start with Dan on the next one.
All right.
All right.
This, you may or may not have played this, but you probably heard of it.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm going to pass on this one.
Peter?
I'm also going to pass on this one.
Evan?
I have an inkling, but it is not strong enough for me to venture a guess.
Okay,
right.
so we're going on to Dan.
Yeah, back to Dan.
Next wider pitch image.
Okay. Shoot. What's the name of that game?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that.
That was the fear of this one. You either know it or you don't, I think, right now.
Yeah, I have a name in my head, but I'm pretty sure it's the wrong name, so I'm gonna pass.
Peter.
I feel like I did get to play this one maybe, but it was a digital adaptation for it, and I'm not remembering the name, so I'm gonna pass right now as well.
Evan?
And I could be completely wrong.
So the inkling that I had is now completely gone. But I'm going to venture a guess and say Colt Express.
Correct.
Oh, nice. Well done.
That wasn't the name that I had in my head,
No,
but that is obviously correct. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that wasn't the game that I thought either. Okay.
And that's the final picture.
All right. And you said it was called Cold Express?
Colt. Like the horse.
Oh, Colt Express. Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so Peter, the next one's going to be for you.
All right.
And I haven't planned this up, other than the first one, I haven't planned it up to line up with any particular person.
Okay.
I just wouldn't want to make sure Peter was the last to guess on Blood Rage. A little bit of a slightly blurry picture, but it's a game we played relatively recently.
Oh gosh.
I see some answers. Wait.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pass on it because I definitely don't know. Not from that.
Evan?
Oh no, Dan's just waiting for it to get to him. He's so ready.
I know it.
You're muted.
I got to throw a guess out because Dan's too eager.
Yeah, I know, right?
Lost Runes of Arnak.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
well
it. Curses
done.
you.
Well done, Evan.
I haven't even played that game. I missed out on the playthrough.
So the next image was a little wider. Final
Yeah.
image. Okay, so we're back to Evan, and currently the score is 2 for Evan. Dan has 0, and Peter has 1.
I was so certain I was going to do terrible at this. What is this?
A game I've talked about, and I think we played it online for most of us.
I'm going to pass because I have no idea.
So this is Dan next, I think. Is that
Yep,
correct?
Dan, you have any idea?
I have no clue. No.
Peter, then.
I've got a game in mind, but I'm trying to think of the exact title. I can't remember. Shoot. It's a firefighter game. I'm just going to say firefighter because I can't think of the title. So that could be wrong, but.
So, well, that was an incorrect guess.
Okay.
So it goes to next, which would have went to the next image anyways for Evan.
Oh, shoot.
Evan, do you now know what this is?
Is it Downforce?
It is.
Ah, man.
Yeah, I intentionally made the first image a little misleading with the railroad track.
Yeah, seriously. Oh, man.
And there's the final image.
Nice.
Yeah.
Evan's killing it.
Yeah, 3 for Evan,
Pure luck.
0 for Dan,
Pure luck.
and 1 for Peter. So, Dan, do you have any idea what this game is?
Is this Root?
It is. So Dan is on the board
All right. Good job, Dan.
on the hardest difficulty.
Yep. If you
Did
didn't get
anybody
that
else
one,
happen to know that?
yeah, I had it.
Ah,
Yeah,
I got it.
Evan did too. Okay.
okay, so that one was just a little too easy, so Dan was able to get it.
I think it was the.
I mean, I've never played Root before,
No.
but like I saw the icon in the upper left-hand corner,
fox.
the image, and I
Mhm.
was like, that might be it.
Yeah, the fox,
Yeah,
the
if you
fox
left-
icon gave.
I intentionally left that in because I thought maybe none of you had played it, but would be familiar enough that you could recognize it.
Yeah, if you left it the woods, we would have been like, Eddie game.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and we are on to Peter.
Oh goodness.
Now, I am fairly certain none of you have played this, but you've definitely heard of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to throw out a guess just to make it easier for the next person. Even though I don't think I know it. I'm going to say Mysterium.
It is not.
Yep. Okay.
This was a game that I think James would have got much easier. So Evan, your next option is this one.
I'm going to guess Unfathomable.
You are correct.
Oh my goodness, Evan. I don't think there's any reason to keep playing. I think Evan has just like crushed us.
Is he got 4 points now?
He has 4.
I think
To
he's
my
got
1.
He's got 4, and each of us have 1.
Correct.
All right. Yeah, I think we should call this one before we embarrass ourselves some more.
Let's do one last one and see if Evan can crush us with one more one.
Oh, we started with Peter on that one, right?
Yeah, that was me on that one.
Evan.
I'm just gonna say this real quick. I like this game. We should play this one again.
Don't give hints.
Oh no, I'm saying
He
this
doesn't need
game. I'm saying this game. The game
Oh.
you're. I like this game.
Not this game that's in the photo. We still have no clue what it is.
Is that even a game? It looks like
It 100% is.
it looks like something I would have in my living room. Like,
I don't want to give you hits because you're got a good lead.
pass.
Dan, this is a game we all love. We've talked about a lot. You can make a guess and pretty much give it to Peter if you get it wrong.
All right. Is this Shiver Me Timbers?
No. So Peter's
I
going to
didn't
get
think so.
an easier image.
Oh,
Yay! It's Dune Imperium.
Yeah.
And yes, I did know it before you did the next picture.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So yeah, that was the final picture.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's where it is in the board. Okay.
Yep. That was a really good like first image though, because that's not a super. You're not focused on that part of the board at all because there's no work
Right.
placement that's
It's
going on there.
It's
So-
just like background. Yeah.
Well, and again, it's like the same one at the very beginning when it was just the ocean of the Blood Rage board. I mean, you don't do anything there; it's just off to the side. So
Right. But it's a game we've talked about enough and you've all seen enough
yeah,
that
right,
there was a chance you could recognize it from the most obscure part of the board.
absolutely. So
Peter has memorized
even
those
though
boards.
even though I only got 2 points, I'm proud of the 2 points I got.
You got a Pyrrhic victory in the end.
There you go.
And Evan won with 4 points.
Yay! Good job, Evan.
All right.
Pure luck.
Nathan, thanks for
Yeah,
preparing
thanks for the game. It was
the
good.
images. This was actually pretty darn interesting. I must admit.
Yeah, I want to see another round of this game at some point.
So would you consider my game a hidden gem?
Maybe.
It's yeah. I like it.
The question is, how do we, make it hamper James playing it?
Well, I used up all Blood Rage already, so. Anyways, we should wrap up. Well, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show and join us again next time.